Welcome to the Workplace Minute, powered by H3HR Advisors and sponsored by WorkHuman. Thanks for joining me for a quick update on what's important in the world of work. My name is Steve Boese. Today in the Workplace Minute, we're talking about the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, workplace discrimination, and a proposal that could fundamentally change how the United States monitors equal opportunity at work. Let's dive in. Over the past few weeks, the EEOC has begun the process of rescinding a series of workforce demographic reporting requirements that have existed in some form for nearly 60 years. If finalized, the proposal would eliminate the familiar EEO-1 reporting process used by employers with 100 and more employees, along with several related reporting programs covering unions, government employees, schools, apprenticeship programs, and others. And the reports collect workforce demographic information, including employee race, ethnicity, sex, and job category. And they've been a cornerstone of federal equal employment enforcement since the mid-1960s. Now, on the surface, this may sound just like a technical compliance issue that only HR practitioners and maybe employment lawyers would care about. After all, many employers view EEO reporting as just another administrative burden. It takes time, effort, resources to collect and validate and then submit the data. And supporters of the proposal argue that eliminating these reports would reduce compliance costs while preventing the government from categorizing workers by race and sex. But I think the story is much bigger than that, because what we're really talking about is a significant shift in how workplace discrimination is identified, investigated, and ultimately addressed in the United States. To understand why this matters, it helps to step back and remember why these reporting requirements were created in the first place. The EEOC was established by the Civil Rights Act of 1964 during a period when discrimination in hiring, promotion, pay, and access to opportunity was often systemic, widespread, and deeply embedded within organizational structures. The agency was not simply created to resolve individual complaints. It was also tasked with identifying broader patterns of discrimination that might otherwise remain invisible. Workforce demographic reporting became one of the primary tools for doing exactly that. So imagine a company where women rarely advance into leadership positions, or where qualified Black or Hispanic workers are consistently underrepresented in management roles, or where the employer's hiring practices produce dramatically different outcomes for different groups across many years. In many cases, no single employee may possess enough evidence to prove discrimination individually. But when workforce data is examined in aggregate, patterns can emerge, trends can become visible, and then questions can be asked and investigations begun. That concept, often referred to as systemic discrimination enforcement or disparate impact analysis, has been a significant part of the EEOC's mission for decades. The data itself does not prove discrimination, but it can help identify where further examination may be warranted. It serves as a flashlight of sorts, illuminating places where opportunity may be distributed unequally. So the current EEOC leadership under the Trump administration has signaled a different philosophy. Last year, EEOC Chair Andrea Lucas stated that the agency would prioritize cases involving intentional discrimination and deprioritize disparate impact enforcement. She has argued that unequal outcomes alone should not be justified to use treating employees differently, and has emphasized a focus on what she describes as the most morally offensive form of discrimination, which is deliberate discrimination against individuals. That broader shift became highly visible several months ago when Lucas released a video message encouraging workers, especially white men, to report instances where they believe they had experienced discrimination based on race or sex. The message generated substantial attention because it signaled a very different enforcement emphasis than many observers have historically associated with the agency. Rather than focusing primarily on systemic inequities affecting historically underrepresented groups, the agency appeared increasingly focused on claims of individual discrimination, regardless of the claimant's demographic identity. And there's another aspect of this story that also deserves scrutiny. While discrimination against any individual is illegal and should be taken seriously, I also find it difficult to ignore the historical irony of an agency created during the Civil Rights era increasingly centering concerns about discrimination against white men and moving away from tools designed to identify systemic inequities affecting women and racial minorities. For decades, white men have been the primary beneficiaries of economic, political, and workplace power structures in the United States. That's not an opinion, that's a matter of historical record. The barriers that women, black workers, Hispanic workers, people with disabilities, and many other groups have faced in hiring, promotion, compensation, and access to leadership are precisely why the institutions like the EEOC were created. The danger is not that individual claims by white men are investigated. They should be. The danger is allowing those cases to become the central focus while losing visibility into the larger patterns of inequality that continue to shape opportunity in the workplace today. Now, to be clear, every employee deserves protection under the law. Legitimate discrimination claims deserve to be investigated, and discrimination can occur against anyone, really. But there's an important distinction between investigating individual allegations and identifying larger patterns that affect hundreds or even thousands of workers over time. When demographic reporting disappears, it becomes much more difficult to detect those larger patterns. It's not impossible, but it's more difficult. The government loses visibility, researchers lose visibility, employers themselves lose understanding of this data, and the workplace becomes somewhat harder to measure, harder to understand, and harder to improve. And one of the interesting points here is that many employers have come to rely on this data themselves. Long before diversity and inclusion became so politically contentious, organizations used workforce demographic data, like in this report, to understand things like recruiting pipelines, promotion patterns, succession planning, turnover rates, and workforce composition. Good data helps organizations ask better questions, and it helps leaders identify blind spots and helps ensure that opportunities are distributed more fairly. So what happens now? Well, importantly, these reporting requirements are not disappearing tomorrow. The EEOC has only initiated the rulemaking process, and now the proposal must undergo review by the Office of Management and Budget, move through the federal regulatory process, be published for public comments, and eventually become finalized before it'll take effect. Legal challenges are also possible, and many employment law experts believe there's a reasonable chance employers will still need to complete at least the upcoming reporting cycle while this process unwinds. For HR leaders, the practical advice now is a little bit more straightforward. Continue preparing as though these reporting requirements will remain in effect until you receive clear guidance otherwise. Don't just assume the obligations have disappeared. But there's a larger leadership question, too, to consider. If these reporting requirements eventually do go away, should responsible employers stop measuring things like workforce demographics, promotion outcomes, hiring patterns, pay equity, and representation trends? I'd argue absolutely not, because compliance should never be the only reason organizations care about fairness. Compliance is the floor, not the ceiling. The best organizations examine these issues because they want to build workplaces where opportunity is generally available to everyone. And they want to know whether certain groups are advancing or being left behind. They want to understand where the barriers may exist. And they want confidence that their internal systems are working as intended. And of course, they recognize that discrimination, whether intentional or systemic, creates real human consequences. Making reporting requirements disappear does not make discrimination disappear, and eliminating these measurements does not eliminate inequality. And refusing to look at the data doesn't make the problems go away. In fact, history suggests the opposite. The willingness to examine uncomfortable truths has often been the first step towards progress. So regardless of what happens with the EEOC proposal, my challenge to HR leaders and business leaders is simple. Keep measuring, keep asking questions, keep examining your systems and processes, and continue to look for ways to expand access, fairness, and opportunity for everyone. Because equal opportunity at work should never depend solely on whether the government requires a form to be filled. It should be a core responsibility of leadership itself. That's it for the show today. A big thank you to WorkHuman for supporting the Workplace Minute, and be sure to subscribe to the HR Happy Hour Network on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Steve Boese, and this has been the Workplace Minute from H3 HR Advisors.